Hello, I'm Rumeysa. I am Senior Bachelor of Engineering student at Kadir Has University. Today I'm presenting our paper titled iGuide, Icon Guide, Gaze-Based Visual Guides to Improve 3D Sketching Systems. So, 3D sketching blends the expressiveness, immediacy, and editability of traditional 2D tools with the spatial awareness, presence, and multiple perspective of 3D spaces. However, sketching in VR suffers from accuracy problems due to depth perception issues and a high amount of degrees of freedom when creating strokes in mid-air. To enhance 3D sketching performance, adaptive visual guidance is one of the concepts to offer assistance precisely where and when it's needed. In the previous work, visual guides activate precisely at the user's controller position, enhancing accuracy without compromising performance. Lastly, we are exploring the integration of eye and hand tracking as a novel means of determining where a grid fragment should appear in 3D sketching space. Our eye movements synchronize with the actions of our hands, particularly during drawing tasks. By the light of this research, we tried to answer three research questions. First one is, do gaze-based visual guides improve performance and accuracy? Second one is the investigation of the usability of the proposed visual guides. Lastly, we investigated how spatial ability affects the user performance while sketching. In previous work by Barrera et al. Found that cognitive load may affect the performance. In that paper, they also analyzed the behaviors of users with different spatial abilities while drawing in VR. They indicated that the user's spatial ability affects the shape of the drawing. For these reasons, we added how spatial abilities affect the user performance as a third research question to our study. In another work, they introduced smart 3D guides included SG-Line. We re-implemented the SG-Line visual guides to our study. In this guide, visual guide follows the controller position when the user is not drawing. When the user is drawing, the visual guide stays static. Another previous work studied eye-hand coordination when drawing over two different styles of static visual guides in VR. Their findings suggest that eyes can indicate where the user may draw and where guides might be helpful. We propose to use iGuide and Icon Guide as a gaze-based visual guides. Here you can see the basic adaptation mechanism of the guides. In iGuide, the grid fragment is shown in the user's eye gaze direction, whether the user is drawing or not. The displayed grid fragment is centered at approximately arm's length away from the user along the gaze vector. Here you can see the example video of the iGuide. As you can see, the grids only depend on the user's eye gaze direction, and the drawing state does not affect the grid position. In Icon Guide, the grid fragment follows the drawing state and whether the controller and other strokes are visible or not. Here you can see the working principle of Icon Guide. Before that, when neither the controller nor the stroke is visible, the grid fragment follows the eye movement of the users at fixed distance. This is the same with the iGuide. As shown in the figure A, when the controller is visible but no strokes are visible, the grid fragment is shown at the controller position and extended to include the point along the gaze direction that is at the same distance as the controller. The figure B indicates that when the controller is not visible and some strokes are visible. In that case, the grid fragment follows the eye movement at a depth of the visible stroke closest to the user. And lastly, as in figure C, when both the controller and some strokes are visible, the grid fragment is shown at the closest stroke to the controller and extended to include the point along the gaze direction that is at the same distance as the stroke. In Icon Guide, grid position depends on the state and whether the controller and strokes are visible or not, as I mentioned. And also, during drawing, the controller position does not affect the guide extension, which allows users to follow a guideline with their stroke. Instead of making the guides appear or disappear suddenly, we smoothly blend the guides in and out. We conducted two studies. In study 1, we investigated the effect of gaze as an assistive system for two basic shapes, a line, a circle. We used HTC Vive Pro I with its controller. We also implemented the Tobii Eye Tracking SDK to the Unity. We recruited 16 participants from the local university, and we designed 4-factor within subject design with 4 visual guides. In no guides, no visual guide is visible whether the user is drawing or not. Second one is SG line, which we implemented from the previous work. And lastly, eye guide and icon guide. Two shapes, a line and circle, is used. Also, as these shapes were studied previously, this approach enables a comparison of the effectiveness of the proposed system to the previous work. Lastly, we added 2 orientations and 2 different sizes. We chose these 2 object sizes as the 60 cm objects were always visible while drawing, whereas the 110 cm one extended outside the field of view, which requires the participants to rotate their hands. In total, each participant performed 96 trials. Also, in the figure, basic shapes that were drawn in study 1 can be seen. To show participants where and how large their sketch should be, we showed small semi-transparent reference spheres in the environment. In the results of study 1, we found a significant difference in shape deviation for visual guides. Participants exhibited less deviation while sketching with eye guides than no guide and icon guide. For stroke quality, there was a significant difference in line straightness for visual guides. The participants were able to draw strokes that were straighter with fewer waves with eye guide and icon guide than with SG line and no guide. Also, there was a significant difference in degree of deviation for visual guides. The participants had less deviation with icon guide than the base conditions and less with eye guide than no guide. And lastly, there was a significant difference in shape likeness for visual guide. Participants drew more accurate shapes with eye guide and icon guide than the baseline condition, but in general they were more accurate with icon guide. In study 2, this study actually investigates whether visual guides affect user performance and the user experience while sketching 2 complex 3D shapes. In addition to those, we also investigate how spatial ability affects the user performance. Shape 1 is a bottle opener that requires users to draw curves and straight lines. The complexity of this object comes from the need to draw curves and 2 circles, one aligned on top of the other. Shape 2 is a geometrical shape that only requires straight lines. The complexity of this object lies in the correct orientation and length of each arm. We used the same Unity version and same headset. Also, we recruited 16 participants from the local university, but none of these participants participated in the first study. We also designed 2-factor within subject design with 4 visual guides and 2 shapes. Also, we included the special abilities as a between subject design, so that half of the participants were selected as a high special ability group while others were in low special ability group. We assigned their groups based on a paper folders test, which was also used in the previous work. In study 2 results, starting with stroke quality, regarding line straightness, degree of deviation, corrective movements, and overall score, participants had better scores with all visual guides, eye guide, icon guide, and SG line, than with the no guide. For matching of two lines, user matched lines better with icon guide and iGuide than no guide. For the shape likeness, participants drew better with iGuide than SGLine and no guide, with icon guide than no guide, and lastly SGLine than no guide. In the case of user preference, the participants significantly preferred icon guide over SGLine and no guide. Furthermore, they preferred iGuide over SGLine and no guide. Lastly, we further investigated how participants from different special ability groups performed with each guide type and how these performances differed from each other. We particularly focused on the evaluation metrics, where we observed statistical significance as the main effect of special ability, which are shape likeness and degree of deviation. Regarding shape likeness, we observed that high special ability participants' drawings received higher scores than low special ability ones. Also, the high special ability participants drew better with icon guide, iGuide and SGLine than with no guide. They also drew significantly better with iGuide than SGLine. On the other hand, the low special ability participants drew better only with icon guide and iGuide than with no guide, while we observed no statistically significant difference between SGLine and no guide or iGuide and SGLine. Regarding degree of deviation, the post-hoc analysis showed that the high special ability participants scored higher than the low special ability participants in the iGuide, icon guide, and no guide. And we performed further post-hoc analysis among guide types separately for high special ability and low special ability groups, as presented in figure C and D in the slide. Both the high and low special ability participants drew better with icon guide, iGuide, and SGLine than with no guide. So our study results show that iGuide performed better than icon guide for simple shape, and participants preferred icon guide. For complex shape, we found no difference between icon guide and iGuide regarding the accuracy or user preference, but all iGuess techniques were better than the other two evaluated methods. On the right-hand side, you can see the highest and lowest scored sketches for each guide and shape. Among all scored sketches, icon guide was used for the high score sketch for both shapes, while no guide was used for the lowest scored sketch for both shapes. Additionally, the highest scored sketching came from the high special ability participants, while lowest scored sketch came from the low special ability participants. In this work, we propose using GAZE as a new modality to assist users in sketching better in 3D environments through two novel iGaze-based guide mechanisms, iGuide and icon guide. Overall, our results show that using GAZE-assisted visual guides can improve user performance and the user experience in 3D sketching. Specifically, when a controller-based visual guide, which is SGLine, is augmented with a mechanism based on GAZE, as we proposed icon guide, we observed better results in terms of shape likeness and stroke quality. Further, this approach was also preferred by participants and received high usability scores. Our results also help us understand the effect of adding visual guides to a virtual environment during 3D sketching. Thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions, please contact me via my email address.